Thank you for being here today. I'm pleased to be here with Penny Owens from Santa Barbara Channelkeeper as our co-host today in our second of these two plastic webinars for Plastic Free July, and along with Sarah Stark from Marburg and Hillary Allen from the City of Santa Barbara Environmental Services. Super excited to bring you this webinar as we close out Plastic Free July. We kicked off Plastic Free July, as you might recall, with a webinar a few weeks ago that focused on all the impacts of plastic that we are seeing, including some new information that we got from a study last month that showed that plastic is now evaporating out of the ocean and going into the air, and we are actually breathing it. So it is way more pervasive than we thought. So today we thought we would dive in a little bit more on what we can do with the plastic that we use, since recycling with plastic is a different type of challenge than other materials. We also learned at our last webinar that single-use plastic is 40% of the plastic that we use. Plastic is a global problem, but we can all be part of the solution, and that the fossil fuel industry sees plastic as a growth area because they are losing market share in other areas like with gasoline and energy. So they are really pushing hard to build new manufacturing and really push more plastic products onto us. And that leads into the social justice aspect of this, because most of the refineries are located in the southeast part of the United States, and a lot of the disposal ends up in poorer countries in Southeast Asia. So this webinar is being recorded, so we will be sending you a recording of this along with resources that come up during the course of our conversation today. So you can look for an email in the next couple of days from us with all that information in it. We have support staff here today with us. Iris, Katie, and Lisa are behind the scenes making sure everything runs smoothly, and you are welcome to private chat with them if you have a question or concern. Today we're going to do some polls, so we want you to participate with us. So those will be coming up during the conversation. And we also invite you to add questions to the chat, and our support staff will be moving those over into Q&A, and we will be addressing most of them at the end, but we will give you a couple of opportunities to ask questions at the close of some of our presentations. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, we will be redirecting you when you leave to a short survey, and we really encourage you and appreciate it if you would consider taking it, because that helps us when we are planning our next webinar to make sure that we're doing things in a way that works out for everybody. So Penny, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and we will get started with our first poll and our first presentation.
All righty, thanks Kathy. Morning everybody. So we're going to first start with a poll. It's 2 questions, super quick. Iris, when you have a chance, please launch our poll. All right, do you see trash when out walking and biking in the community? Simple yes or no. And is plastic the most common type of trash that you see? And actually a little bit what we covered, we'll give folks another second here. In our last webinar, we also talked a little bit about how we are seeing an uptick and an increase in single-use plastic and unfortunately associated litter with the single-use plastic lately. So 99% of everyone sees trash while walking. I'm jealous of the 1% who doesn't. And looks like we have about 73% of folks say that trash is, plastic trash is the most common type that they see while out. And that actually, in addition to Channelkeeper's work with the policy on reducing single-use plastic, we also do cleanups. And back when we could host group events, we would have group cleanups, and plastic was the most common thing we saw on our beach cleanups as well. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Hillary Allen with the City of Santa Barbara Environmental Services. She's the recycling educator there. Hillary is a Santa Barbara native who's been with the city since 2005. She started with the administrator's office, but eventually moved over to environmental services because she connected with their mission to reduce waste in the city. As a recycling educator, Hillary does a bit of everything in the office, from customer service to food scrap trainings to talking about recycling. So Hillary is going to kick today's webinar off with some great information about recycling and our curbside blue bins. To you, Hillary, thanks.
Thank you, Penny, and hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Hillary Allen, and I'm the diversion coordinator for the city of Santa Barbara. And I'm going to talk about a few just really practical things that you can do to make some changes in your life. So I'm ready for my first outline slide. Thank you, Iris. Sorry, slide. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to touch into the concept of wish cycling. And, you know, are you doing it? What is it? I'm going to talk about why reusable is always better. And then at the end, I am going to talk about what is recyclable and why. I know people have a lot of questions about that right now, and I know that it is really confusing. Slide. So first thing, we're going to go right into wish cycling. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this term, but wish cycling means that you wish it's recyclable. You know, you hope it's recyclable. You really want it to be recyclable, but you know, it's really just not recyclable. So a lot of people put these things into their blue bins thinking they're recyclable, but they're not. And the overarching reason is because they just aren't good quality. Things need to have quality to go to market. So these things, whether or not they have food residue on them, or they're made of multiple products, or they're just a really filmy, poor quality product, they're not recyclable. And so when these things leave your blue bin, they go to what's called a MRF, which stands for Material Recovery Facility. And MRFs have to spend a lot of time and effort and energy pulling this material out of the recycling, because these items are considered contamination. They're not going to pull any of these items to be recycled. So as citizens, it's really our job to make sure that we're preparing the recyclables for their best chance. So when we wish cycle, when we put these items in the recycling that aren't really recyclable, we're actually creating more work for the MRF. And if MRF didn't have to pull out all this contamination, they may be able to do a better job at recycling what's actually recyclable. And also as citizens, the best thing to do is for us to go to our city and county's websites. There's always up-to-date information about what's recyclable. You don't have to do any wish cycling. The information is all out there. Next slide. But the great thing about those items is these items can all very easily be replaced with reusables. And so you don't even have to wonder whether or not they're recyclable if you remove them from your life altogether. So the biggest change that everyone can make is to ditch single-use items. So what a single-use item is something that's been designed to be used one time before it's thrown away, or recycled or composted. Most of these items are plastic, and they're often poor quality materials. So again, all these items on this page, if you just no longer use them and reduce them out of your life altogether, that's a huge positive change you can make. Next slide. So I know this is a terrible slide, I apologize. You're not meant to read all that tiny writing, but I really like how it illustrates. So if you use a plastic fork or even a compostable fork for your lunch, you use it for 10 minutes, you throw it away, you compost it. That fork has a lot of embedded energy in it. There's energy, materials, and waste spent at every stage of its life, from the raw materials acquisition to the manufacturing of the fork. Then it's transported to the store where you purchase it. Then you use it, and then whether you landfill it, recycle it, or compost it, it has to go on another truck and through more machinery just for you to have used it one time for 10 minutes. 100% of the time, the better option is going to be using a reusable, washable item over this single-use item that has so much embedded energy in it. Next slide. So, go back. Okay, so the easy thing is, okay, well, so it's not easy. It's actually hard. It's really hard because I do it and it's hard. So that it's easy because there's more sort of materials out there than ever to help you, but it's to go reusable and to try to reduce all of this single-use plastic, or not all, as much of it as you're able to, out of your life. You know, reusable bags, not just at the supermarket, but at the drugstore, at the hardware store, at the mall. You know, we don't ever have to take a single-use bag again. Reusable utensils, straws, to-go containers, coffee cups, water bottles, packing your lunch in a reusable container, challenging vendors, not only as an employee and as a business owner, but also just as a citizen to feel empowered to, you know, ask vendors, you know, can you get through the transaction without having any trash? A little aside, we had a little bagel shop near our office, and we went down and talked to the owner and said, you know, if we come down here, will you give us our lunches without any trash, without any to-go containers? Can we bring a plate? And we were able to make an arrangement with that owner. So we never took any trash for all the years we went there. They were happy to have our business. We were happy to go there, and we were able to educate them about waste reduction. And it was a really great business relationship. Anytime you can reuse containers rather than recycling them or throwing them away, that's always a win. And just a reminder that reusables are safe. You know, we're in kind of a scary time right now. I know we really have reverted back to single use, you know, mostly to keep restaurant workers safe, which of course I really support. But just we want to remember that reusables are safe, and that we want to continue to use them and incorporate them into our lives. Because this really is about lifestyle changes. So like the photos on the bottom you see at the far left, those, you know, they're kind of dirty looking rags because those are rags from a kitchen that are used on the floor and on the counters to replace paper towels. You can buy reusable produce bags rather than using those single-use bags at the grocery store. Even if they're single-use compostable, reusable bag is better. And then just little things like gift giving. You know, gift giving is a very consumptive thing to do, the ribbon, the paper. We often buy gag gifts or stocking stuffers, which are just sort of trash. You know, the idea that you can reduce waste and single-use trash out of your life in so many areas, and there are so many places where we use it and we don't even realize it. So those are really big changes that you can make in your life. Next slide. So a question I get a lot is, what about items I can't reduce? Because, you know, obviously this is a very complicated industry. So many things are made of different materials. You have to buy food. Food comes in either trash or recyclable container. And I think what happens is that people get so paralyzed by how confusing it is that sometimes they just don't really do anything. So my advice is, while as a community, we should continue to put pressure on these manufacturers to make better packaging and to create better products or to have things in bulk, you really should remember to focus on the things you can control. For example, you don't ever have to take another single-use bag again, like I said, or straw, or utensil, or coffee cup. Those things are very easy items to control your waste. So rather than, you know, your family likes yogurt, you buy yogurt, you're gonna have a yogurt container, even if it's a bulk yogurt container, you know, that's something that's a little more difficult to control. So just focus on the things you really can control. And if you see yourself buying something that has a lot of trash, maybe consider not buying it rather than worrying about all of these things that are really difficult to control. For example, we get a lot, does the soda need to have the lid on or off to recycle it? But to me, the question is more, could you have bought that soda in bulk in a bigger container? Did you need to buy it at all? Rather than getting in the weeds about the cap, we need to make bigger lifestyle changes around things like that. Next slide. So on that note, we are going to have packaging sometimes, and the question is, with the packaging that is recyclable, we do want to recycle it, but what is recyclable and how do we know? And here is a photograph of what is recyclable in Santa Barbara. And what you can see is that what it all has in common is that it's clean and dry, it's larger in size, and it's good quality products. Recyclables have to be purchased by brokers. It has to go to market and be purchased. So you notice in this picture, there's no candy wrappers or tiny, tiny little items that are very difficult to recycle and not cost effective. What we're looking for is, you have to almost think like a broker. We're looking for items that have great value on the market and that people are gonna buy, such as these items. And again, I highly suggest you go to our website. If you ever have any questions about what's recyclable, it's all on there. Next slide. So the question is then, how clean do my recyclables need to be? And the answer is they need to be really clean, because again, these items are going to market and purchased by brokers, and the brokers are looking for material like on the left. They are not looking for material like on the right. And in fact, when your recyclables go to the MRF, the Material Recovery Facility, if they see items like on the right, the employees will not pick those up off the line for the brokers, because the brokers would never buy them. I did just see a question asking if cartons are recyclable. In the city of Santa Barbara and the county, no, they are not recyclable. So those just need to go straight into the trash. Next slide. So this is a good segue to Sarah, who's our next panelist, because she's going to talk now about the market and what happens to your recyclables after they go in your blue bin. So we want to make sure that we're giving Marburg and our haulers the best quality. recyclable so they can do their best job to recycle it. This is what the material looks like when the brokers buy it. And so that is the end of my presentation. Did anybody have any burning questions that I can answer?
There's a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A, Hillary, if you want to
Okay.
peruse that and answer a couple now. We're up to 13 questions over in the Q&A. Maybe there's a couple easy ones.
Okay, so let me go through. Since this is about plastic, I'm seeing some plastics are touted as compostable. Where should those plastics go? That's a great question. There's a very easy answer. Every jurisdiction that has a composting program is going to have different rules. In the city and county of Santa Barbara, we do not accept compostable plastic in our compost. So the easy guideline is if it looks and feels like plastic, we treat it like plastic as far as the compost goes. Now, the problem with compostable plastic is you cannot recycle it. So compostable plastic either needs to go into a commercial composting stream or, compostable plastic needs to go into the trash. If they do accept commercial composting for plastic in your jurisdiction, you can put it there, but we don't in Santa Barbara, only paper and food. Milk cartons I'm seeing, no, they're not recyclable. Do cans need to have the labels removed? No, they don't. And we don't take Tetra Packs. Those are not recyclable. I think those are probably a pretty good amount of questions for now.
Thank you for running through those so fast. And thanks for that presentation, Hillary. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
One quick little Zoom tip that I want to give to you if you don't already know this. Sometimes the slides can get covered up by the video boxes that go in the side of the screen. If you go to your view options and click on side by side, then that will shrink the screen enough so that the whole slide shows in case anybody is having difficulty seeing the entire slide. That's like one of the two things I actually know about Zoom. So, Iris, we're ready to start our next poll before we go into Sarah's presentation. Do you want to pull that up? Here we go. Here's a little plastic question for everybody. Really appreciate all the questions. We're up to 24 questions in the Q&A, so we will try to leave plenty of time at the end. And once we get these the poll results to you, then get Sarah going. We'll definitely try to get to all of your questions today as much as we can. And look at that, 96% picked all of the above, and that is the correct answer, but the other answers are also correct since everything on there was a right answer. No wrong answers on that one. All right, thank you for participating in that, everybody. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Sarah Stark. She is the Marburg Industries Environmental Compliance and Outreach Coordinator. She works closely with the City of Santa Barbara and surrounding jurisdictions to ensure that business and residential complexes are in compliance with state and local recycling laws. She earned her master's in environmental science and management from the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara. And Sarah is going to enlighten us about what happens once the contents of our blue bins leave our homes.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. I am ready for my slides. Great, so you can go to the next slide. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm gonna be talking more about the business side of things, including what happens to our recyclables once you place them into your container, some of the difficulties of recycling plastics, and then also share some thoughts on the future of plastic recycling. Next slide. So we're going to start with sort of a behind the scenes look at what happens after our recycling is put out for service. A lot of people, they'll throw something out or they'll even recycle it and never ever think about that item again. It's out of sight, out of mind. It's pretty easy to forget about it. But there's actually quite a bit that goes on after this. So the first step is hopefully you're sorting your recycling at home and then putting it out for Marburg to collect. We then pick it up. We pick up both residential and commercial recycling. The commercial recycling gets brought back to our downtown MRF, or materials recovery facility, to be sorted. And the residential recycling goes to the county transfer station. It then gets sent down to Ventura to be sorted at Gold Coast Recycling. So the material is sorted by either Marburg or Gold Coast Recycling, and it's sorted with a combination of hand sorting and machine sorting. Any items that are not recyclable at this point, so whether they were placed in the wrong container to begin with, or maybe they've been contaminated, will be sent to the Tehugas landfill. It's just up the coast, like along Gaviota, and that's where all of our trash goes. So it's really important to make sure what you're putting in the blue container should be there, because it has the potential to go all the way down to Ventura, only to go all the way back up the coast to be disposed of. It's quite a waste of resources. Once the items are sorted, they'll be baled with their similar materials. Those bales will then be loaded into semi-trucks and transported to be recycled. They might be going directly to a recycling facility, or more likely than not, they're going to a port to be sent overseas to be recycled. That material will then be melted down in the case of plastic and be recycled into something new. So I just want to point out a couple things. First of all, we don't recycle anything locally. A lot of people are surprised by that. They often think that we're doing recycling in our backyard, and we're actually not. This model is often called collect, sort, and export. Just keep that in mind. And all of these steps require energy, transportation, and resources. And we're not even touching on the energy, transportation, and resources that go into making the plastic or the actual recycling process. So just little food for thought. Next slide. So once the plastic has made it to the recycling facility, why can't we recycle all of it? Next slide. One of the reasons is that not all plastics are created equal. So this is an example of two different plastic items. We have a meal tray on the left and a water bottle on the right. And you can see they are extremely different. They're made from different plastics, meaning they have different melting points. The way they are produced and formed is different. They have different dyes for coloring. Chemical additives are making one rigid and one flexible. They even hold different contents. So these two items are really difficult for one recycler to handle. Next slide. Part of having all of these different different types of plastics, it makes it expensive to process. It requires advanced technology and money, like I mentioned, and we frankly just don't have great infrastructure for that in the United States. Next slide. I just wanted to touch on how many different types of plastics we are dealing with. This is a picture I took of a store recently, and this is just one section of the store. And we're looking at a bunch of plastic containers, from right to left, top to bottom. You can see there are a lot of different types of plastics. So I don't know if you had a chance to count at all, but next slide. I was able to see 21 different types of plastic containers just on these shelves. So we are dealing with a lot of different plastics these days, and it makes it pretty difficult to process. Next slide. So plastics are also really prone to food and liquid contamination, and foam plastics notoriously will clog machinery, and they can carry that contamination with them down the line. So all of these things can make plastic undesirable to recyclers. Next slide. Recyclables, just like any commodity, are subject to shifting markets. In order for recycling to make business sense, as Hillary mentioned, there needs to be a demand for it, and we also need, paying customer. So plastics are made from petroleum, and when oil prices are low, like they are right now, it's unfortunately cheaper to make new plastic than it is to recycle it. The chart on the bottom left there is showing that even last year, the scrap value for mixed plastics, that's numbers 3 through 7, were actually in the negative dollar amount. And then the larger chart on the right there is showing the national average prices of recyclables. So this is post-consumer recyclables when they're baled and ready to be sold. This is looking at the dollar amount from last July versus present July. And you can see that it's kind of all over the place. Some of this does have to do with COVID, but the market is constantly changing, so it's can't be totally blamed on the pandemic, unfortunately. Next slide. And probably the largest market change that we've encountered recently is that we lost our biggest customer. For decades, China was the world's largest waste importer. In fact, 70% of America's plastics were being sent overseas to China. And that's because they had low contamination standards and very competitive pricing. In fact, part of the reason we don't have great infrastructure in the United States is because we relied on China so heavily in the past that there wasn't a need for it here per se. Basically, the rest of the world was sending them junk, dirty materials that was really detrimental to their environmental and human health. China gave us several warnings saying to clean up our act, and we didn't. And so in 2018, they enacted a policy known as National Sword. Next slide. So the National Sword policy banned 24 types of imported waste, including mixed papers and mixed plastics. China set really strict contamination levels, so they only allow 0.5% of contamination, which is really difficult to achieve. And because there was all of this material now that needed a place to go, other Southeast Asian countries began accepting it, but they had to also place these very strict contamination standards as well. So this chart is showing the first year since National Sword was enacted. We're looking at the amount of tons of mixed plastics, again, numbers 3 through 7, exported just from California. And you can see that it just plummeted. This National Sword policy had worldwide effects on recycling, and this is why our rules most recently changed locally, which you all probably felt in the paper and plastic, primarily, those categories for recycling. Next slide. So let's touch on what the plastic future might look like as far as recycling. Next slide. So I don't have a crystal ball, I can't predict the future, but there are certain steps that we can take locally and on an individual level as well to sort of help with our plastic problem. Locally, it's important for us as their waste hauler to communicate that we need clean and dry recycling. It's really important to minimize the contamination to make those recyclables more valuable. And that makes them more valuable not only overseas with the strict contamination standards, but also domestically. And ideally, we would have enough demand for these things to be recycled domestically that we can get more recycling to happen locally. It's better for the environment, better for everyone. A lot of waste haulers and recyclers, since National Sword went into effect, have been upgrading their machinery, their technology to increase the volume and quality of their recyclables. So Marburg is actually building a new MRF, again, a materials recovery facility, up at the Tehigas landfill as part of the county's resource center. This is a picture of it under construction on this slide. And this is going to be using technology like laser scanners and optical sorters to help keep more recyclables out of the landfill that shouldn't be going there in the first place. We also really need to hold the plastic industry accountable for redesigning and refocusing reusable products and designing closed loop systems. For years and years, they've been, telling us this narrative that recycling is the answer, recycling is the end all be all, and it's just not true. They're the ones putting most of that plastic out there, so we really need to put pressure on them to change their ways. And there are some bills in draft form right now working on that, but that's going to take time. So in the meantime, it's really important for us to practice the 3 R's in order of importance. As Hillary mentioned, first we really want to reduce, then we want to reuse as much as we can. And really we want to treat recycling as sort of a last resort. We need to really shift our mentality away from recycling and the feel-good aspect of that and really go back to basics with the reducing and reusing. Those actions really do make a difference though, so not all is lost with, with this. So yeah, that's all I have, and I'm happy to field a couple of burning questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. I think if you want to take a quick look at some of the questions here, we'll give you a chance. I'm sure there's a lot.
Sure. I see somebody asked about, Mark asked about envelopes with windows. You do not need to cut the windows out. Those are acceptable to be placed in your recycling. And on that topic, I did create a new interactive guide on Marburg's website. It's called How Do I Dispose Of? And it has a lot of common items that you might have at home or at work. And you can go through and learn about where they go and why they go there. So I recommend everybody check that out. It's fairly new and can really help answer some of the questions here.
There are a lot of local resources, Marburg, the county, and the city, CEC. You just got to get online. People have really good up-to-date information. I think most of your questions could be answered on our sites.
I see a question as well about like the recycling symbol, and I know someone else had asked about that. I don't know if it was answered, but what I tell customers is to ignore the numbers on your plastic items. Those were never meant for public consumption. Unfortunately, you know, the plastic manufacturers make those as a way to identify what type of plastic they are to be recycled. And so it gets confusing because some 1s and 2s we want, some we don't, some 3 through 7s we want, some we don't. So for us locally in the Santa Barbara County, I recommend, you know, reaching out to Marburg or the city or the county and just finding out what we do and don't take. The general rule of thumb for plastics, as Hillary mentioned, is large. If it held a liquid, that's great. If it held food, we do not want it. Don't care what the number is, we don't want it. And that same, I get this a lot too, pizza boxes we no longer want. I know we were accepting them for a time, but like I mentioned, things change and we don't want them. I think
a good one, Sarah, that asked about how much material that is in the blue bins ends up at the landfill. Do you have a percentage on that or a rough estimate?
I don't, but I know that, what is this? So the county does all of the great graphics for the Resource Center and the statistics, and I believe it's 60% of what goes into the landfill currently should not be going in there at all. So from that 60%, half of that is recyclable and half of that is compostable. So that's part of what the Resource Center is trying to tackle is getting that number down.
Great, thanks. Any others standing out to you at this time? We'll have time at the end for Q&A.
Yeah, I think I'll pause here.
All righty. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. That was, and Hillary, those were both really informative and great presentations. Before we segue into our final component of our webinar today, where we're going to look a little bit into the impact of our consumption and what's going on locally, we'd like to reach out to our wonderful audience and ask another poll here. So, Iris, if you'd please launch the poll. So what is the largest individual carbon footprint contributor in the US? Food, travel, purchases, or home energy? Give folks another minute. All righty, Iris, go ahead and post the results, please. All right, so we have about 50% food, definitely a component, travel about 23%, 14% purchases, and only 6% of us thought it was home energy. The correct answer is D, home energy. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And so I'm going to hand over, we're going to kick up our presentation slides again. I'm going to hand it over to Kathy to talk a little bit more about the big picture. Kathy?
Thank you. Thanks, Iris. The next slide. Yeah, we thought we would, in the middle of all this, just take a second to back out and have some perspective, because our average carbon footprint in this country is 20 tons a year, which is significantly higher than most of the rest of the world. And you can see that electricity and heating, cooking in our homes accounts for about a quarter of that. That's not to say that there aren't other impacts, but we thought we would just back out a little and look at that. And locally, transportation accounts for 40% of our collective impact here in Santa Barbara County. Next slide. I think it's for Penny. Yep.
Yeah, and I think both Hillary and Sarah spoke to this a little bit already, but just really remembering that at each step of the life cycle of plastic, there are environmental and health impacts to our communities, from extraction, refineries, and we talked about this a little bit in the last webinar, where they're located, and often minority communities with a lot of health issues, to even just our use of these plastic materials. They can leach toxins into our food, recycling, the resources that go into the transportation, the machinery running those, shipping the items across the seas. And then in many cases, instead of recycling, the items are incinerated, and there's a lot of health impacts on the community with incineration. To even waste, there's new studies showing that as plastic breaks down and photodegrades in the environment, it's emitting gases and pollutants as well. So plastic at each stage of its life cycle has significant impacts. Next slide, please.
And it also, as we have heard, creates very specific disposal challenges. And we are generating about 35 million tons of plastic waste a year in this country. So just to break that down a little bit, about 41% of it goes to the landfill, 32% ends up in the oceans, because as we have learned in our last webinar, about 3 out of 10 pieces of well-intentioned disposed of plastic get out into the atmosphere because of the lightweight nature, and it gets out of escapes due to wind or animals trying to get the last bit of food out of it. So all of that unintentional litter gets into our waterways and ends up in the ocean, where we now know that it is turning into dust and evaporating. And 14% of it, as Penny was just talking about, gets incinerated. Most of that's in other countries, but toxic pollution does not know boundaries, so that stuff floats all over the place. 8% is the number that actually gets recycled, but this chart comes from The Story of Plastic, which is a film that I highly recommend watching if you haven't already seen it, because they talk about something that I hadn't heard before, which is effectively recycled, which means it gets recycled into another product. So only 2% of all plastic actually gets made back into something else similar. And that other 6% in that 8% that gets quote unquote recycled gets made into something else one more time, and effectively is at its end of the life cycle. Next slide.
All right, and Sarah mentioned a little bit, we do have some federal and state bills that will look a lot at the producer responsibility. We mentioned these briefly in our last webinar, but we wanted to give you all a little bit more information, and also remind everyone that letting your elected officials know that you support these types of policies, and these specific policies is crucial and really important. And so first up is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2020. That was introduced into Congress in February this year by Senator Tom Udall and Representative Alan Lowenthal. And it would address the root causes of plastic pollution by holding producers responsible and reducing the amount of plastic we make, use once, and then throw away. So here you can see it's targeting specific items. It has a pause on new and expanded production facilities in the country. It will standardize some of the labeling for recycling and composting. It will limit the export of plastic waste. So that's how we've traditionally dealt with a lot of our plastic waste, was shipping overseas. It will have a big overhaul of the nationwide beverage container and refund, and include a lot of investments in recycling and composting infrastructure here in the US. In California, we have the California Circular Economy and Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, a Senate Bill 54 and Assembly Bill 1080. And these will cut waste from packaging, plastic, and other single-use products required most to be recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2030. And it's a target of 75% reduction by 2030. And the bill also includes some an overhaul and incentive and policies to encourage in-state manufacturing using recycled materials generated here in California. And so those bills are, they need to be voted on by the end of August. So in our resources following up from this webinar, there will be some links for information to sign petitions and also how to contact your elected officials to let them know that you support these policies. This legislative cycle has been pretty unique. We're dealing with unprecedented times with COVID, and the legislature's been really focused on budget, items related to COVID, and other urgent matters. So while what's going to happen this year is a little unknown with these plastic reduction bills, it's still crucial that we let our elected officials know that our legislature, the governor, that we support these bills and that we need a change in plastic policy. And I also want to mention that there is a California ballot initiative for a Plastic Reduction Act, and they're still in the process of collecting signatures. And that would be for a ballot initiative in 2022. And and our resources will also have information if you want to read a little bit more about that plastic reduction ballot initiative. There's a lot of energy and hope for that. And I think we need as many opportunities as possible to really deal with this issue and really look at the reduction and how to hold the producers responsible. Next slide.
So we have had some regional success with 7 laws that have limited distribution of these types of plastics, especially the ones that are given away. We started with plastic bags. It's been over a decade, but we did have local success with plastic bags, and that helped lead to the momentum that created the statewide bill, which we have in California. There was a 60-day moratorium on the 10-cent fee that Governor Newsom put into effect with COVID. That did expire on June 22nd, so the fee should be reinstated, and you can put pressure on your grocery stores to start allowing reusable bags again, because there is really very little evidence of any surface transmission of COVID, and even if there was, it wouldn't be limited to reusable products, right? It could be any product. We've had success with Styrofoam, not as much as we would like, and we hope that that leads to local or statewide momentum again on Styrofoam. We have still not gotten Goleta or the county to do anything about Styrofoam, so there could be some pressure applied there locally. A few years ago, straws became like the hot ticket item, so we went for that and realized that we needed to start wrapping in other items so that we wouldn't have to do this piece by piece with single items. So the straw laws included stirrers, lids, and some items on request like cutlery and condiment packets. So we've seen that even on request provisions really help when you have to stop and think about whether you need a ketchup packet or whether you have ketchup at home. It really does make a difference in what you get from your restaurants. But an even greater holistic approach is needed, kind of what Penny outlined in those federal and state bills. And there has been some leadership in cities in California with that. Berkeley and Santa Monica both have very strong laws in effect now that are being phased in, but ultimately they are doing what those state and federal bills that Penny outlined, where they are making sure that everything that gets given out is either actually like effectively recyclable or compostable. And I think both of those cities do offer residential compost, so that makes a big difference with that. But not everything we buy, as we saw in the slides from Sarah, when you look at what's available at the grocery store, not everything we buy can be regulated in this way. So it is up to us to put pressure on companies that we want to buy from to make sure that they know that we want packaging that is more sustainable, and it's up to us in our daily choices. So a top-down and bottom-up approach is definitely part of the solution. Next slide.
There's Kathy and I behind a large bale, many bales of film plastic at the Adlets, a local dry cleaning company. And they have been running a film plastic collection program. She was Sasha Ablitt. I think she's even watching our webinar right now. So hey to Sasha. She was looking to find ways to reduce waste from her business and found this recycling diversion program available through a company called Trex. So there you see the bales of film plastic, and on the right, that little blue machine is the film plastic baler. So next slide, please. So for many years, Sasha was collecting the business's film plastic, baling it, and had participated in a program through Trex where they would collect that film plastic, transport it down to a sorter, and then on to a manufacturer here in the US. It's actually in Nevada. And then it was processed into composite decking and railing, like that photo you can see of that like kind of wood-like material. We often make park benches and playgrounds out of that Trex material, or decking. I think Sasha even has her personal deck that's made out of that material. And she, as recycling was changing from those laws that Sarah was talking about in China, and what we could and couldn't recycle was changing, she wanted to do more and offer this program to the community. And so in 2019, she opened it up to the community, and that's when Channelkeeper and CEC joined in to help support Ablits with both drop locations and also with the volunteers that were needed to sort the plastic to ensure that it was the right kind of plastic. You may be noticing a theme with recycling. It needs to be clean and dry, and it needs to be the correct material for successful recycling. And last year, we're pleased to report that the collection more than quadrupled the amount of plastic she had previously diverted from the landfill to 11,000 pounds. But contamination was still a huge factor, and to the point where it was making it challenging if Ablits was going to be able to continue managing all of the sorting and the baling. And so just like to remind folks that this is really a landfill diversion. And after this film plastic is made into that Trex decking material, once that item is no longer usable, it's headed to the landfill. So it's not recycling in the true sense of one item being made back into another item that we can use. Next slide.
So as you may have gathered, things are changing with all of the things that we're doing with plastic, and the Adlets program is no exception. We have been kind of pedaling as fast as we can to take what people are bringing us and sort it and take it to Ablets to help them with alleviate some of the workload that they have. But we haven't really seen enough reduction in contamination to continue on the way we are. So Sasha has started a new program there, even with COVID. There you can see I went to a demo that she did a few weeks ago, and everyone had their masks on, and that's John in the front there that you can see from the back. He is one of the lead staff at Adlets that has been a great champion of this program. So what they're asking everyone to do is to come to sessions that are set up in advance. There's one tomorrow afternoon, I think it's at 2 o'clock, and sort it yourself with help from them and us if we're able to join, and take away what's not usable. And we heard a great tip from somebody recently that, you know, you can put all the items that you're absolutely positive, the stretchy number 2, number 4 plastic that's clean and dry into one bag. And then if you have questions about other types of items, because the Trex parameters do change from time to time. If you have questions about those, put them in a separate bag. That'll make the process go easier for everyone, including you. And that way you also will know what to do for the future. And this is, again, it's about our choices. It's about trying to reduce the consumption that we have with the packaging that we choose. Because if you know Penny and I for over a decade now that we've been working together, one of our favorite things to say is that the best single-use plastic is the one that we don't use in the first place, for all the reasons that you heard today of the enormous amounts of impacts that it has. So with that, we will conclude the presentation portion, and we've got a whole bunch more questions, and we look forward to getting to those now.
While we're queuing up some of those questions, I had been saving some of examples, and I saw this question pop up of what are some examples of film plastic that can be recycled. So what we're looking for are plastics number 2 and 4. This is with the Ablitt film plastic diversion collection program. It accepts items like bubble wrap, your bubble mailers, like here's my big bag I'm pulling from, paper towel, and it needs to be stretchy. And we want to make sure folks understand if it's crinkly and not stretchy, more like a cellophane type plastic, that is not accepted into the Ablit's film plastic collection program. Here's an orange bag that has some like woven material. That's a no. We have, I got some fishing line that somebody left in my door in the bag they left at the office the other day.
6-pack rings are a no. We get a lot of those. The little thing that goes around like a pill bottle or a ketchup bottle, you know, that little piece of plastic. Love it that you think that, you know, is something to save, but it's also a no. Those things are no. We get a lot of those. And they're really hard to sort out because they're so tiny and slip into all the crevices of other bags.
I know I have one in here even.
There you go. That's
Crinkly. So even though these are types of small plastics, as we learned in this presentation, there's many different types. And we really want those larger, more valuable items. Like this program originated for, you know, pallet wrap and, you know, that high quality, clean plastic. So if you're not sure and it's a crinkly plastic item, you can save it on the side for us, but we really need to work to get the contamination down. So hopefully that answers a little bit, and we'll dig into some questions now.
Thanks for the demo. All right, Hillary and Sarah, you can unmute yourselves because I'm going to guess that a lot of these questions are directed toward you. Someone's asking if there's a place to take single-use plastic bags. That would be this program.
It would be this program, but I would like to reiterate, I did see in that picture, a lot of the single-use bags that people had were bags that could have really easily been refused to begin with. So just remember that that's all of our first step, is to refuse it before you get in your car and drive it to try and recycle it. You know, whenever you can, there's some plastic we can't get rid of, but the stuff that you can, just try and not use it at all.
Thanks for that reminder, Hillary. And someone saying that grocery stores are not allowing customers yet to bring in reusable bags. Some are, some aren't. Tri-County Produce has allowed all during the pandemic. And some, I think, you know, it kind of depends on the mood of the cashier. Once at Lazy Acres, they let me bag mine there. And then another time they said, oh no, put that away. But the most common practice, if you don't want to get into any type of that kind of discussion with the cashier, is to just have them put them back in the cart. And I think they're hearing a lot of that because it doesn't take much prompting. If you say, oh, just put it back in the cart, and they just get it right away. They put them back in the cart, and then I either bag it like right outside the grocery store or at my car.
Some places will allow you to do it if you bag it yourself.
Someone's asking why we don't partner with TetraCycle to recycle hard-to-use plastics. There are some programs with that, but it does require like having a bin to collect it and then to send it to them, because there isn't any thing to do with it locally. Is that your understanding, Penny?
Yeah, and there's a charge as well for their bin, their collection bin, and the mailing. And they actually do
putting it in a truck or on a plane, and then it's already not that great of a material. So what are you making out of it? Again, we really want there to be these magic solutions to these things, but this stuff sometimes isn't even cost effective to recycle. It's so many plastic and paper and foil and tiny little layers in a Tetra Pak. It's difficult and expensive to extract them. At the end, have you spent more than you're going to make on it? You know, these are the questions we have to ask ourselves when we buy these products at all.
Yeah, and give feedback to the stores. Oh, sorry, and give feedback to the stores, because I've noticed some places where I go that they're migrating. Soup is showing up more in Tetra Packs than in cans. So that's, you know, customer feedback might help with that. There's a quick question, that I saw that I like this question from Dana because it addresses something we didn't cover at all, which is batteries, electronics, and light bulbs. Who wants to answer that one? Good question.
I can answer it. So again, please visit our website or the city or county's websites, or call us. We have real live people in our office every day to answer your questions. But batteries electronics and light bulbs all need to be kept out of your trash. The only light bulbs we'll accept in the trash, again, that's trash, not recycling, are the incandescent bulbs. So the kind of like the older model of bulbs. All of this information is on our website, but batteries and electronics and light bulbs do need to be handled separately. For residential customers through Marburg, you are allowed to put your batteries, your household batteries, in a Ziploc bag. Yes, I know it's a clear plastic bag, but please use one for this purpose. Put your batteries in that bag, put it on top of your recycling container, and our drivers will collect those. Do not put them in your container. They cause fires, extremely dangerous for our staff. So yeah, batteries at home can be recycled that way. All the other information, we have drop-off locations available all online, or a simple phone call will get you that answer.
Thank you. Here's kind of a basic question, but I like it. Is there a reason a more uniform plastic is not used for everything? And I think Hillary, who had the side-by-side, one of you had a great side-by-side, Sarah, of different types.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer. I mean, people are making plastics. It's the business they're in. I don't even know how the industry would go about that uniformity. I don't know, Kathy, if you have a better answer.
Yeah, no, there's just too many different types for all the different kinds of products that go in them.
And the different needs for it, you know, I mean, plastic is an amazing invention. You know, it has pros and cons, of course, like any material. So, you know, we need flexible packaging for certain things. We need foil lined packaging for certain things. We need the sturdy plastic for others. So yeah, I don't know. I am getting distracted by one other question, sorry, that I see real quick. If I completely clean a plastic container that held food, can I put it into recycle? No. If it held food, we do not want it if it's plastic.
Thank you. Appreciate that. There's so many questions. It's hard to, Penny, are you
so don't waste water cleaning it, basically.
Yeah. Any questions that stand out that are easy? We've only got a few minutes left. Someone's asking, do the bags used versus plastic from clamshells break down at all? I'm not sure what that's getting at, but plastic breaks down. It doesn't break down in the landfill, right? But out in the world, it all breaks down by the sun into teeny pieces.
Yeah, and I think somebody had touched on this. I'm not sure if maybe it was answered, but you know, someone made the point of, well, what about reusable bags? Because when we dispose of those, you know, they're still not going to break down. And I think, as Hillary mentioned, like all of this can get really overwhelming. Every resource you use, every item you use on a daily basis, go to the grocery store, look at, order online, like it had to come from somewhere, right? So there's resources going into everything you use. It has a beginning of its life, it has a use to its life, and then it has an end to its life. So there's pros and cons to all of those materials, all of those steps along the way. I think kind of the main point of all of this is just lowering your consumption. So if you use one reusable bag in replace of 10, 20, 30, 40 single-use bags, that's great. If you're going to go out and get 100 reusable bags, don't. That's not the point of this, you know, because then we still have a waste problem. And you're right, those things, a lot of those are made with some plastic in them. You might find 100% organic, or I'm sorry, 100% cotton, but I digress. But yeah, just limiting consumption is really, really important.
Thanks. Somebody shared a tip about how to differentiate some of the plastic for the film plastic program from Pat. She said in San Francisco, we call that shiny plastic. So that might be another way to help you divide up your piles. There you go, shiny. I know that a lot of stuff from Trader Joe's comes in that, because that's a lot of what I end up sorting through. Someone's asking about Isaac, good friend, is asking about styrofoam. What kind of styrofoam is recyclable? Because I believe there's a program for that through Heal the Ocean, right?
Yeah, so Heal the Ocean has a program to recycle, basically the way it's described as styrofoam that bends or snaps. So that's going to be like your big items that you might get like an electronic shipped in, or trying to think of other examples, but the big blocks are primarily what is accepted. We don't want anything that bends and doesn't snap. So that's going to be like meat trays, packing peanuts, any of the more flimsy styrofoam. And it's Heal the Ocean's program, but we do collect it as Marburg to help them out at both of our recycling centers. That information, again, is on our website if you're interested in what we do and don't accept.
Thank you. Anybody see any more quick questions we can answer in our final minute here? And just a reminder, when you leave, you'll be redirected to a survey that we would be very grateful if you'd take a few moments to fill out. Are Brita water filters recyclable? Julia is asking. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so, because I think that there's, when there's multiple materials in an item, somebody along the way is going to have to disassemble that item. And my understanding about processing is that generally isn't going to happen. So there's filter materials inside that plastic piece. And so probably I would feel as if that came down the recycling conveyor belt, they're not going to pick that filter up off because they know that there's other material.
I believe Brita has its own recycling program for their filter. So I don't know, but I'm almost positive they do, but I think it involves mailing it somewhere. But that's something, if you have a kind of an odd item and you know where it came from or who made it, you can certainly reach out to them or ask us, and we can direct you to that manufacturer, because they oftentimes do have unique recycling programs for their own products.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do one more because there's so many. Sorry, we're not getting to them, but you'll get our contact information in the follow-up email. From Fia, can I recycle aluminum foil? I think that's kind of an easy one to go out on, even though it's not plastic. I know a lot of people have that question. So
yes, it wants clean.
Yes, if it's clean.
And you can definitely reuse like the foil baking trays. Those are really easy to clean out actually and reuse if they're sturdy enough. So then when you're done with them, clean them out and recycle them.
But again, we have to be thoughtful of the idea. Did you need to pull a piece of foil off to line your pan so you didn't have to wash it or whatever? These are the thoughtful things. Like sometimes the foil didn't need to be used at all.
Love it. Thank you. It's a great thought to go out on. So appreciate everyone for being here today. Hopefully we'll be able to get together in person at some point, but until then, this seems to be a nice way to make these connections, and I really appreciate everyone's time, especially our great speakers and panelists and my co-host, Penny. 12 years of this and we're still going strong. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.